Hey everyone, welcome to lecture 3 of the Code Sprint program. I'm Sam Sandoval, your technical project manager, and today we're going to focus on diving into React Native and learning more about how to get started. So let's kick it off. So here's a link to the slides so you can come back to check them out later, as well as our GitHub repo to get the code and any assets that you might need for the demo. So yeah, check these links out. So kind of mentioned in the lecture, before we begin, we want to make sure that you have some of these technologies installed and ready to go for this lecture. For those of you who have a Mac OS system, please make sure you have Xcode and an Android Studio installed, as well as the Expo Client on your smartphone. If you do not have a Mac OS, so don't worry about Xcode, just make sure you have Android Studio and then the Expo Client on your phone. Expo Client is a great app where you can run your React Native applications mobilely on your phone in the app through a QR code scan. And then Android Studio and Xcode are very great for running your iOS or Android emulators when you're trying to test out your project. So get these set up. So here's a brief overview of what we'll be discussing in today's lecture. We'll be going to what is React Native and what makes it up, as well as talking about components and going more over them in this setting, as well as writing some basic React Native and how that would look, as well as going through a demo and getting that started. So let's go into what is React Native. React Native is a JavaScript framework that is useful for writing native apps and allowing us to build a bridge connection between iOS and Android. And these are some of the great properties of the information about it, such as like JSX is still being used. Components are similar to React, except React Native uses native components, so it relies more on views, which we'll go into a little later, as well as the tools are different, and it uses a thing called Bridge, which manages to connection with the UI with both iOS and Android, because they both have different types of views and images. So yeah. So the way React Native works is just like in React, it steps through with the JavaScript being compiled in ES6, ES7, ES next, and then breaking down ES5. But since it's a bunch of different files, it's all one JS bundle. And this one actually runs on a phone, which it separates the threads for UI and JavaScript, which is definitely great. And when it comes to bridges, it's separate threads, but then one thread with the UI and JavaScript. So say you're writing something with React, you're writing a button, and basically what happens is there's a bridge that communicates with these two threads. So yeah, it communicates asynchronously with the bridge, which handles the connection between the threads, because the JavaScript thread will request a UI element to be shown, as well as its a great connection with handling their updates and communicating the bundles to them. Here's a brief diagram to explain this relationship. So on the left side, we have a UI, which is handling the user interface, and the diamond, let's say that's a button. And then in the middle, we have the bridge, and then on the right side, we have the JavaScript bundle. And then, so here we have, whenever the user presses the button, the UI will send the JS like, oh, the button was pressed, so you see that the arrow is pointing that way. And then the bridge works asynchronously with that. But if something happens to the JS, like, oh, we have to block it, then the UI thread can still do its thing, which is pretty great. Conversely, it's very similar to if you touch something in the UI and the JavaScript doesn't really know what it is until the bridge brings over the information, it will communicate back with something, an action or response. So that's how both of these communicate with each other via a bridge. So that's a little bit about React Native. So now we're going to go into talking about more about components and what they are and what the importance is with them when using React Native. So in React Web, we have access to div, span, image, and declaring globally. With React Native, we have to import some of our components from the React Native library. And some of them that are different actually are that instead of using divs, we're using views, which are cross-platform blank UI slates. And now instead of using span, we're going to be using text, which handles all the text that we're trying to outlook with that. And when it's button, it's actually just capital button now. So it's like its own component, which is pretty cool. And it handles on press to handle any type of actions handled by the button instead of on click. Then we have scroll view, which exists here for scrolling, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So there are obviously more components that exist. If you'd like to learn more about them, we have the documentation link at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, check them out. So when you're building an app, you want to style it and make sure it looks nice and pretty. And one main difference with React Native is we don't really use CSS. Instead, we use JavaScript objects to give us these dynamic styles. And the way it uses it is they have object keys based in CSS properties. So we have similar properties such as like margin top, we have bottom margin padding, and we still use the same idea with like Flexbox. It's almost the same as Flexbox Webs. I guess one of the key differences here is that rather than defaulting in just like a single row, you can default with laying things out in columns, which is definitely great. Another thing to note is that lengths are unitless in React Native. It doesn't really rely on pixels or percentages, it's all unitless. There's also this thing called style prop, which is the way that the components handle taking in a style, which is pretty great because it can take more than one and take an array, unlike React Web, where it's just like a certain class or ID that's just one. So it's pretty cool. So there's this thing called style sheets, which handles the way our applications are actually styled and look. And it's pretty cool that because they handle how they look. And kind of like earlier, the links are unitless. And the way it actually works is kind of like we talked about with JavaScript communicating with the UI with the bridge. It handles from pulling from the style sheets and optimizing each time and relying on some of these style sheets. And one, I guess, little note to know is that there's a way to optimize this. So a way to optimize this when you're actively in the development mode is you want to make sure that every time you have a style, the UI thread will know, and you can do that by assigning an arbitrary ID to this so that when you're importing the style sheet, it's pretty smooth and updating constantly. So this is definitely great for optimizing when you're actively styling your applications. So kind of like in React Web, we have this same thing as components in React Native. And it's pretty much representing a discrete piece of the UI. And so there are different types of components. As we've seen on the before, there's something called the stateless functional component, abbreviated as FC. And what those are, they're basically functions. So they do like something like to do, and they create a function that takes in the props and returns some type of node. Has no concept of state. And so that's why it's called stateless functional component, which is a function with no state. That's pretty much what it is. And then the other one is React.component, which we've been extending and we haven't really talked about in depth. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, we're going to dive into what a stateless functional component is. A stateless functional component is the simplest type of component. You should be able to use this when you don't need any state. And what it is it's a function that takes the props and returns a node. And it shouldn't do anything other than taking a props and returning a node. So, and it's pretty much also called a pure function, which is cool. In other words, it shouldn't have side effects like setting a value or pushing an array or updating an object. Something like it should be like that because of it takes in the props and returns a value. If you do other stuff, then that you might create some bugs or even crash your app. So definitely be careful with this. As well as anything you change in the props that you pass into the stateless functional component will automatically cause that function to be revoked. And then after it revokes the function, then it returns these nodes. So React will do its thing and compare the nodes, what it has in the virtual DOM, and then go ahead and replace what it needs. And so on. And the other side of the coin, we also have React.component. So we'll go into that. This is something that's actually provided by the React library and implemented for us, which is pretty cool. It's pretty much an abstract class that's extended to behave the way we want it to behave. In our previous workshop, we made some pretty basic components that extended to the React.component. And so we're going to go into what is a React.component. Well, these things have additional features that the stateless component does not. One of these is, of course, that you have instances so that they're a class. And so when you invoke that class, it returns an instance. And that instance will persist throughout a lifetime of this class. As suggested by the name, it maintains its own state. And so stateless components do not, whereas these components do. They also have this concept of state. A lifecycle is similar to hook or event handlers. So we basically used event handlers before React Web, and now we're doing it in React Native. And these things are automatically invoked for you, and you don't have to worry about these implementation when you invoke your own function. And that's actually something that's already done for us, which is definitely really nice. And so unlike stateless functional components, which just take in the props and return a node, React components render functions, which actually becomes a function of the props and also takes the class properties that exist. So it's just pretty nice. And these properties can be values from anywhere, from functions to just primitives on objects. And so when you create a class component instance, you can use any of these class properties in the React render, which is pretty nice. So up to now, we've been learning about like React Native components and like the environment and style sheets and all this. And you're like, okay, like now, we know this, what can we do? So now we're going to kind of shift gears and focus on how we actually write the React Native code. So there's this company called Expo, and they pretty much handle an open web platform for developing React Native web applications, which are really cool. They provide a lot of tooling around React Native and the community, and they're pretty much a suite of tools that accelerate the development process for React Native. And so when you're using Expo, there's this thing called Snack, which is pretty much like it opens up a new project in the browser, and you can like code whatever you want. And it automatically bundles any libraries that we need, and you can import other ones. They also give a tool called an XDE, which is a GUI, a graphical user interface, that serves to share and public any Expo projects you have. They also give you the command line interface to do the same things. And yeah, and they also give you the Expo Client, which is a phone app that I mentioned earlier that you can install and run the stuff you write in the Snack, and as well as manage the XDE or the CLI that actually run in your phone. And lastly, they give us an SDK, which is a software development kit, which bundles and exposes the cross-platform libraries and APIs. And it also includes maps for like things like icons, images, and SVGs, and even some animations. So that's pretty much a little snippet of what Expo is. It's definitely great. We're going to be developing our React Native applications with it. And yeah, so when you notice in React Web, there are certain things we have to import when building our applications. So like in React Web, we import other components or libraries and such. And it's very similar in React Native. And we haven't really talked about like what that would look like here. So components are great for simplifying code and pretty much kind of like emphasizing what we said in like React Web. We like to split up our components in other files and make our code look cleaner in the main one. So we'll be doing a lot of importing for different libraries and stuff and components and stuff like that. And we can also import a component before it's even being used in a file, which is great. There are multiple ways to import and export. There is default export, and then there is also import or export. When we go ahead and import and export our component, they can start to get more and more complex as we pass down the props inside the application. So you might be asking, how do we keep track of all these props? So there's this thing called prop types, which can help us with that. And so in React, it validates the given component props at the runtime, which is great. It's a development tool that allows you as a developer to ensure that you're passing in the props that you think are actually being passed down, which is cool. And so let's say you're passing down some prop that's a number, but you actually want it to be a string. And it's very easy as your project scales to get something mixed up when you're like, oh, I want this, but I want that. And so there's this thing called prop types to handle that. And then React actually does this automatically in the development mode. And this is also great to help document any APIs you're using. Let's say you're working at like Facebook and you have something like 30,000 components that you have in production. It's going to be really painful if you don't have a way to document all of those components and work with the props. So that's why handling this with prop types is really useful with handling all the different props that are handled. And it can also help self-document in all these APIs. And that's really nice to have it run in the development mode so you don't not have to worry about slowing down your production in the production mode. This is definitely great for using this when you're in development mode and trying to document all of these APIs you're using and catching that before you push to the production mode and you're like, oh, I can't do that now. So definitely check this out and using this. So now we're going to shift gears and focus on our demo. So please go to the website expo.io. We're going to be using Snacks to start off our project, and then we'll migrate over into setting up your Expo project locally. So do that. Hey everyone, welcome to this live demo for the lecture 3. Today I'll be showing you how to work with the Expo SDK and build a simple React Native application. I'll be going through how to use the Expo like web development tools here, as well as like how to run the emulators, going over some components, some style sheets, just some basics, kind of reflecting off of what I talked about in the slides. So first things first, please go to expo.io. It is an online editor for working with Expo here, and here we'll be also building off with React Native. So go here to this website. Once you get here, you'll see this screen, or if you have dark mode, it'll be inverted. But you have to either sign up or log in. Since I have an account, I will go to login. And then, yeah, I'll log in. Sick, I'm here. Normally, one easy way to get like around this once you log in is you do snacks. I think it says snacks.io, but sometimes for me it takes forever to load, so I'm not doing that. I have one pre-built already for this, so I will be working off of this. It's kind of like Replit. They have like the weird random names they give you. So yeah. So here's like the template code that they have, and you can also run the emulators here. So here's the file structure. We have like assets, components, all that. And yeah, so yeah, for first things first, you can pretty much clear this view. No, keep the view actually, just get rid of what's inside, like the text, I think, yeah. So, yeah, and then it dynamically changes. So then, just quick things, you can see how it renders and it goes live. We also don't really need this style sheet, so you can just get rid of that for now. Yeah, get rid of style sheets. I'll be going into like how to, yeah, and it gives you an error when you don't code something right, but yeah, that is interesting. Oh, that's probably why. Yeah, so we don't need this for now. Just keep it a blank view. Yep, that's good. Cool. So we're gonna create a simple application here with Expo snack here, just to give you a feel for how to do that on your own. So first things first. Just kind of explaining kind of like what we meant in the slides. These are the imports. You're importing the different components and APIs up here. as well as any assets. Yeah, so like with the local files, they have an asset sample here, and then any cards, which are any modules, and then it kind of exports. So if you've ever worked with React, kind of like with lecture 2 with the demo on how to like do React, this is like kind of like React Web, but kind of like different with like the views, and instead of working with like the JSX hybrid, so it's a little different, kind of like with what I explained earlier. So yeah. So first things first, when you're with the view, please go to type in this. We're gonna make a simple style. So style with padding. Don't ignore the errors. They go away over time. I mean, pay attention to them, but if it's like dumb errors, like you're like right now I'm coding along. So yeah, just don't disregard them. So yeah, we have the text, and let's type hello world, and then it will go up. Hello world, bam, beautiful. Gotta love it. And let's see what happens when I go to here. Hopefully there's no. Okay, so there's no. Okay, so you can also emulate here with Android or iOS. So you just hit tap to play. So here you can see that the device is connected, and once you hit tap to play, it will show up in your emulator. And the same works for iOS. And just a little disclaimer is sometimes there is a wait time for emulating on the online IDE. So I suggest that you wait, I guess, or I'll be showing you how to test it with your Expo project locally, and you could test it even on your phone. There's an Expo CLI app, and we kind of mentioned earlier to download it so you could test it on your phone. So yeah, this is how you work with it in web. I will actually be pivoting right now to tell you how to set up a simple Expo project on your local machine. So when you're first starting off to get the project set up in your terminal, you need to make sure that you have the library installed. So what you do here is you have to do npm install g expo CLI. That will install the library. You need to also make sure that you have the right version of Node.js set up, because sometimes it says, hey, you have the wrong one set up. So that's a way to avoid that error. So the command to set up the project would be an npx expo init first project. It might look different if you're on a Windows computer or running on Linux. So just look at the documentation for that to see like if the commands are a little different. So once you do that, you'll be prompted to choose a template. And normally I just want to do something blank because it gives you an empty canvas. So once I do that, it downloads all the dependencies for JavaScript, and kind of like building the Create Web React app with React Web. It's building up the boilerplate code that I would need for React Native. So yeah, I'll give it a moment. So once the project is done, it gives you a short list of commands to run to see the project work and all of that good stuff. I'll explain what it means in a bit, but generally when you're running the project locally, you do want to run npm start. So I will test that out right after I open up the file. So go to your editor after you install it and just open up the project. So here it's like first project, and then like I'm using VS Code here, and then I'll drag this out so it's a little bigger. And then yeah, you have the Expo shared. You have like all the files here. Your main file is app.js, and then I'll add something different here just so it's fun. Okay, so real quick, I'm gonna add padding so that things are like smoother. Yeah, so the padding just makes it so that whatever you're working on isn't at the top. Actually, hold up. I don't really need this right now, so I will be explaining style sheets in a bit, but for now we can just ignore what was there. You don't have to delete it, but I'm gonna delete it for now. So yeah, open up. Yeah, let's change this to hello world. All right. Yeah, status bar is also another thing from with Expo, another component. So to run the project, you just need to run npm start, and it'll set up the local host with that. So now here it's just like Expo starting the project. It gives you a localhost window, which I will show you guys right now, actually. And it gives you a QR code to like run it on your phone. This is what it looks like with the locally. You can also run it on iOS simulator from Mac. If you're on Android, you can run that as well. Please also make sure you set those up so this will work. For this demo, I will be just mainly using the Expo online editor. And then, yeah, if you want to check it, test it on your phone, make sure you have the app downloaded and then hit the land button and then check it there. And yeah, whenever you have a device set up, it's going to tell you the device, like in this little area, it'll be like iPhone 11 is running or something like that. And I guess just for this purpose, I have iOS set up, so I can install that. So let me install that and then show you guys what that would look like. Because yeah, and then it tells you like when it's processing stuff. So yeah, so then here's the emulator. It's opening up right now. So after you run your simulator, it kind of takes time to build the bundle up. So it took a couple minutes for me. And yeah, this is what you see. Hello world. Just a simple mobile application that just kind of popped up. And yeah, I just wanted to start off with showing you how to get the project built and using the components and just basically setting up the basic text. So actually, for the rest of this, I will be working off of the Expo online editor for this, just so I don't have to keep so I can show the testing between Android and iOS. So yeah, let's continue on. So the next thing I'm going to be focusing on showing you guys is going to be importing different components and seeing how they look like, whether it's something that's a component with just iOS or something with Android. So back to what we were working on Expo, we're going to be starting off with importing some simple UI components and seeing how they work. So to kick things off, let's import the activity indicator. So go to the import up here. You can just add it to what's here. So for formatting sakes, we'd like to do just one component per line. So we're going to do activity indicator. Activity indicator. Love it. Yeah. Actually, make sure you also format this just so it's readable. And then inside here, you could just do you could add the activity indicator just like if it's a component. Yeah, and then you can specify like what size you want it and the color. So the color here would be, it's gonna be, make sure it's like a hex value. So it's 61D8F8, so F8F8. And then you also need to make sure you just have like the backslash here. And yeah, so then there is the activity indicator. Voila. And then you could preview it in iOS and Android. For this tutorial, I'm just going to use web for right now, and then I'll demo the rest of it later. So that's a great one that you can see there. It's very helpful and cool to include. Another one I wanted to show you guys is a progress view in iOS. So let's do progress view in iOS. So we can add that actually on top of this. Let's do progress view in iOS. I'm gonna make sure there's a backslash, and then we'll do progress. Let's say, for instance, let's just say like they're only 30% of the way. All right, and obviously we can't see it here, so we're gonna actually go to iOS so we can test this out. So when it opens up the project in iOS, you'll see that voila, the progress view is right there. And if I wanted to change like where the progress at, let's say let's go to 60%, it will dynamically change it and increase it. Yep, so it increases the progress view, which is pretty impressive, right? Okay, so now let's import another one. So the whole objective here of like importing different components is just to like, I guess, show you a little sample of what some of the components that exist in React Native. You can learn more about these in the documentation. We'll drop the link in the README file of the GitHub repo we have set up for this lecture specifically. So yeah, so that's why we're doing that. So now we're gonna import a button, and then I'll add the button tag here. So let's do button, and then we'll make a simple title. Click me. Click me. Yes, yes. And then on press, we'll make a button. We're actually gonna use a little function that we're gonna be making in just a few moments for this to work. And it's gonna be like, what the heck is on press? Yeah, we're gonna make that actually appear. So you can make your functions in general like before the return, because return is what's getting rendered. And this will be like an arrow illustration function, kind of like what we learned a couple of chapters ago. And then, yeah, it'll pretty much console.log a message. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see this. Make sure you use the little tags here. You can see this if you're running it locally, like, oh, like it shows you like the little console error, because that's where your console thing is at. But here we probably won't be able to see it, but that's okay. So you have that, and then you gotta make sure you put button pressed. There we go. Voila. So yeah, this is just a button. It clicks interactively, and yeah. So yeah, those are just some of the components. We're actually gonna try something out. Instead of doing this, you know what we can do, which is pretty impressive, is we can change this. We can import another one. There's another component called alert, which is like on web, you have like Windows.alert, which gives you that blurry message on there. It's like, hey, don't do this. On mobile with React Native, you can just, instead of doing console.logging and sending to the console, you could just do alert, which yeah, it comes up like, hey, like at this time the button was pressed. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, so another component in API we're going to work with is called dimensions. So import it up here, and then outside here we're going to actually going to code out like what we want to get from it. So we're going to do components. We got height, and we got width, and this is just to show you how like this can get the dimensions of a single user's window. So yeah, we got that right, and then I believe you should just print out text in the text components here. You can do text, and then you could do like height equals, I think height. Let me double check my math here real quick. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it gives you the height of the dimension object, which is pretty impressive, and it goes the same with width. So yeah, so one, I guess, little problem you want to know is with React Native, we want to build apps that both work on iOS and Android. And what you're seeing here works for iOS, and you're like, how can we make this work for Android? And I'm actually going to show you a way we can do that with another component called platform. So import platform. I'll just put it right here. Platform. Oh, I can't spell that. And what you can do with platform is add a little bit of logic to make sure, like, hey, every time the platform is this, do this. So like kind of like if statements in other languages. So let's see. So we got platform.os that returns to you the operating system. So if it's iOS, and then we have the little and brackets here, then you want to make sure that it returns this because that's the iOS one. Obviously there's oh shoot. All right, so yeah, so you copy that over. If platform.os is iOS, oh, actually I'm supposed to use a parentheses here. Oof. All right, give me a second. Yeah, so use parentheses here, don't use brackets because that's not great. And it's giving me, yeah, so then yeah, if it's that, now it renders. If it's that, do that. Otherwise, we want to make sure that we do Android. I'm just going to copy this for now and then just like change it to say Android. And then we have to import the progress bar on Android. Yes, that exists. So there's a progress bar on Android. Voila. So now we can be like, oh, if it's Android, here's what we're going to import. And it's going to be progress bar on Android. And then just so we can make this visible, we have to add a couple attributes here. So like you can do style.attr, which is like it's pretty much like styling in CSS. I mean, not CSS, in HTML. You can add styling or in like the divs and stuff, div tags and all that. So it's doing that. Indeterminate, which is like containing the Boolean value here, like indeterminate. We want to make sure it's false. Color is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure it's blue. And then progress, which equals 0.5. All right. So let's test this out in an Android so we can see that it works. So yeah, now that we're connected to the Android emulator, you can see that it gives you the progress bar in Android because obviously it looks different. And then the button, yeah, the button press, yeah, see they have it does it the way it works in Android. So this is the progress bar in Android, and then I showed you earlier in iOS. So yeah, that's how it renders here. So yeah, so I mentioned earlier something about style sheets, and I did talk about it in the lecture. So kind of like brief background with that. So in React Native, instead of using HCSS and all that, there's something called style sheets, which help you to just style up what you want to work on. So in this part, we're going to be making a simple style sheet to style what we want, what's going to be on our page. So let's get started. So in here, we're going to add a simple variable with style, and then we got to do a style sheet dot create. Actually, we got to make sure we import the style sheet. Don't forget that, folks, or else it gives you an error that doesn't exist. So yeah, it'd be like style sheets. Yep. Once it does, the error goes away. Yeah, wait, cannot find variables. Oh no, that error is disregarded now. All right. So yeah, we're gonna make a couple little areas. Like in CSS, there's like classes and IDs. Here it's a little different. You can just do like styles dot whatever. Yeah, it says page isn't defined, but that will get defined shortly. So yeah, margin top is like the version, instead of doing like, I think there's I forgot what the CSS property is for margins, but it's different here. You got like margin, wait, which one? Unused style. Okay, I think in here we're gonna put styles dot page, I believe. Unexpected token. Oh, maybe, I don't think you need, once you put these in, I only think you need one brace. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, well, instead of hard coding the CSS now, you can just do styles.page, and then it gives you the error if you don't use like a certain one. So make sure to do that. And then yeah, background color is similar to like what happens in CSS. So yeah, cool. So we added that, and voila, bam. The view, since it's only this little section, it uses this color. So that's just one. We're gonna make a couple more. So with what we're working on next. So speaking of that, we're gonna roll back with what we had before, and we're just gonna do text, just so that like things are a little bit more organized and simple. So yeah. All right. So we're gonna make a text style thing here as well. So obviously it gives the error. Don't disregard that. It's fine. So yeah, make the font size for it. We got the color. Let's go for like let's go for blue, because actually we're using blue I think already. So maybe red. Yeah, let's go for it. And then let's do the background color, something I guess cool. Yeah, orange maybe, or yellow. Let's do yellow. I'm just trying to make sure that we diversify. Also make sure to put your commas after, or else it might not work as well. It'll give you these errors. The margin is just a general margin. Padding, which just adds padding. And yeah, so to get this to work, we'll just do this. Style equals, oh no, that styles text. Bam, we got that red text with a yellow background. So yeah, we're gonna just probably do that for all of them. So we got height, and you know what? Since we haven't done width, let's do width, because I did not delete it from above. Actually, did I? No, they're all so important. Cool. So yeah, the width. Oh no, inactivity timeout. Yeah, make sure you click it so it doesn't tell you that you have to get kicked out. So yeah, make sure you have commas after each of the style sections here so that they work. And then we're going to do one more for selected text, because you know every time that you select text, you want it to not be the same. So yeah, so we're going to we'll make sure that the background colors are different. So the background color will probably be red. And yes, it loves to give me errors. And then pretty much we're inverting the colors at this point, but yeah, yeah, there's like no one on it. So let's test this real quick. You know, gotta be a little adventurous now and then. So you have selected text right here, bam. And yeah, look at that. Look, it actually shrunk a lot, but you know, it's all good. You could probably just import this. Actually, fun fact, since you have two of them here, the one that actually gets used, as you can see here, is the second one. And that's because when you have two style sheets in one style tag, it will just default to the second one. So you want to make sure you use one, or like add some JavaScript logic that you can just have this certain styles come up at certain times. So you can be like, oh, if this is like a button, for instance, be like on press. If this button is like getting pressed and you want the style to go to the selected one, rather if it's not selected, you want to make sure that it's the regular style. So with the text, so you can do that as well. So this was just giving you a little sense for how to make style sheets, why they matter, and what you can do with them. So another thing you might have thought about as well, I brought up a little bit, was this little word called flex. In CSS, there's something called Flexbox, and obviously in React Native, that doesn't go away because we're working with like screens, and we want to make sure that there's a Flexbox technique here. So to get that going, I'm gonna show you how to use flex, justify content, align items, and then implement selected text to be a little bit better. So to kick things off, we're gonna just use what we had before, but add a couple of things. So we're gonna add flex here, like I mentioned, that handles the flex direction, the flex system here. And then we have flex direction, which that is column or row, kind of like with CSS. And then justify content, which handles like the way the content is set up. So you can do like space around or like flex end, flex start. And then align items, which just handles where how the items get aligned. So for here, we're going to do flex start. And let's see how that looks. Give it a second. Oh, there we go. Bam, bam, bam. Oh, actually, I'm also going to get rid of this one because it's kind of not working with us right now. So give it a moment. Ba bam. They're all lined up on the left side of the phone. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. Obviously, it's going to like, oh, select the text doesn't work. I'm going to disregard that. But yeah, this is how it would look if with implementing the space around and then justify content. That's a spaces around. If you did this, it goes on the other side. Yeah, look how dynamic that is. Huh, very interesting. For now, we will do this. All right, next one. Let's go down to the, to like text. So there's another one called text align, which that just handles like where this text gets handled. So yeah, you add center and then it just shows you that, oh, yep, there it is. It centers out the text if it's too big and whatnot. And then lastly, I'm going to actually show you how to increment some of this with using a little property called align self. Align self just handles the positioning for a certain section of, or a certain like attribute here with itself. So yeah, of it, and then give it a moment. Oh yeah, add a comma. That's important. So yeah, you didn't see much change, but I'll show you what happens. Moment. Yeah, bam! It goes to the other side. Yeah, because like the aligning self just kind of aligns, helps it align creatively. And yeah, so I know I did a little rushed overview of the style sheets. If you'd like to learn more, just go to the documentation. I just wanted to give you a little sense for like, oh, how Flex works, the way the items can get around, and just the way we can position certain attributes and components in our code. So we had to kind of pivot off for one last thing I wanted to show you guys with image components, just because the Expo online editor was kind of being weird. So I'm running a project here locally. You can also hop back over to do that. And just a simple like boilerplate like we had set up was good. For this part, I'd like you guys to get the images from the GitHub repo. We have two of them, Jungle and Biscuit. They're cat pictures just to show you like what you can do with these components. So yeah, let's get started. So first you need to import the image from the React Native library here. And then that handles with image tags. And then next we're going to import both of our photos. So let's import, let's call it Pic Biscuit, because it's a picture of our friend that's a cat, Biscuit. And then you'll import the image tag itself, save it. That doesn't do much. I'll also do that. We'll also duplicate that for Jungle. So let's duplicate Jungle. Also, while we're doing this, the emulator is running, which is pretty cool. So yeah, and then we'll make sure we have the style set up. So we'll do styles.image. There's nothing there, but we'll get to that in a few moments. We do Pic Biscuit, and you will see Biscuit. Voila. So now we're going to add a style sheet tag here for the images. So we have image, which will handle that. And then for now, we're going to actually do resize mode, which handles with like the size and where it goes. So resize mode, voila, we will have the image in the middle. But we want to make sure that we can have two images. So we're going to actually add a couple more properties so that they can handle that. So let's get started with that. So first things first, we got to add a flex so that it handles the Flexbox method here. And then we add a border radius, which handles the borders. After adding border radius, we're going to add margin, which is 10. And then we actually have to add a width that that handles the width from the dimensions that we kind of mentioned earlier with getting width and height, my bad. And then also so that they fit both together, we want to make sure that the width is -10. And then, yeah, and then you'll get something like this, which just sees like both images rounded. So yeah, that concludes this demo for lecture 3 of the whole project program series. We hope you learned a lot and hope to see you around in the next video. As well as if you have any questions or like anything that you have concern about learning React Native, or like any ideas or projects, or anything we want to talk about, we have a Code Sprint channel on the Discord, so check that out. And yeah, have a good one.